contemplations. May all beings have happiness and create the causes of happiness. May they all be free from suffering and creating the causes of suffering. May they find that noble happiness which can never be tainted by suffering. May they attain universal impartial compassion, free of worldly bias towards friends and enemies. Semjen damje dewatang dewe jutang den pajutik, dungal tang dungal chichu tang trawajutik, dungal mepe dewa tampatang mindra wajutik, nering chaktang ni tandrawe tang no chempolane pajutik. So good evening, everybody. We are going to do a beautiful topic tonight called VAJRA speech, including mantras, sound, breath, and energy. And I think this is really such an important subject. I really do. And I should add to that, including joy, because I think VAJRA speech, one of the most beautiful things about VAJRA speech is that it is completely joyous and completely spontaneous. Now, the whole point is that if you look at VAJRA speech, it is a speech that comes spontaneously. Mantras are the electricity of it, but it's also the whole of communication, the whole of sound, the whole of breath, the whole of energy. So it's actually such a vital part of our lives. It's not only speech, it's also the non-verbal communication. It's also the sound. And, you know, I haven't taught this a lot. I once or twice, I taught a little bit about VAJRA speech, but, you know, very little is taught about VAJRA speech. And I'll tell you why. Because when we're talking, we talk about the mind, which is the essence out of which the speech comes. And we talk about the body a lot. So we talk about the mind, and we talk about the body, and we do talk about blah, 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 the onward going rubbish that we sprout out all the time and what comes on the news, hello, Kathy, and everything else. We talk about that, but we don't talk about VAJRA speech. And VAJRA speech, which is Amitabha, is the speech communicator of the Lotus family, Amitabha, Chenrezig, and Guru Rinpoche. And so it is absolutely exquisite to understand the whole of VAJRA speech. Now, what I want to do, everybody, is I want to take this slowly, because for me, it's a real treasured subject, so treasured that for me, it's like, as I was creating this talk, I was thinking to myself, there's a blank sheet of paper and I've got all this color and I've got to put it onto the paper. That's how I felt. I feel very precious about teaching about VAJRA speech, even though I think I'm pretty ignorant about it, but I'm definitely evolving and developing. But what I want you to do tonight, which is really important, I want you to butt in when you want to say something, because it's so important that all of you get a lot out of this. And if you're tired, just walk around your room a little bit. I know Kathy's on the train, so she'll listen from there. But the thing is, it's really, really one of the most vital things of the communication of our whole lives and how we actually interact with people is the speech. Now, ordinary speech is one thing, and VAJRA speech is something completely different. And I want to show you how ordinary speech covers over VAJRA speech. But we must have discussions. I can't just do it and then some of you are bored or some of you aren't listening. I really want you to be involved in it. So, Fee, if we can start with that prayer that I gave you. And this is an amazing prayer for all of you. I've really done it because you have to know body, speech, and mind, VAJRA body, speech, and mind. But tonight, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the speech and the mind, but I'm going to tell you, I mean, about the body and the mind, but I'm going to tell you mostly about the speech. So this is something that I do every single day. I do this, and I think it's a really important thing. And when I've done this prayer, talking to this beautiful master who did it, when I do the prayer, I always say at the end of the prayer, and may I also acquire the unchanging Vajra body. So photograph this. I don't know how you do it, but photograph this if you can and use it. And I say it every day in the bathroom. So let's say it together with the mantra, which is one of Manjushri's mantra, who's the being of wisdom. It goes, Om Amarani Jivantaya Svaha. Om Amarani Jivantaya Svaha. Om Amarani Jivantaya Swaha. So let's do it together. Your indestructible Vajra body of great bliss, visible and yet empty, fully adorned with the youthfulness of the major and minor marks, is the marvelous embodiment of the victorious ones, the Nirmanakaya to teach beings. May your life be as firm as the unchanging Vajra body. That's the body side. Then we go to the speech, which is why I brought this thing. Your unobstructed, that's such an important word, your unobstructed Vajra speech, audible and yet empty, voice of the profound and secret teachings, endowed with 60 qualities, and I've got all those 60 written down for you, is the Sambhogakaya, manifest in accordance with the inclination of beings. So whatever beings need, that's what it means. May your life be as firm as the unceasing Vajra speech. Very important. And then finally, your Vajra mind, beyond arising, dwelling, and ceasing, cognizant, which is aware, and yet empty, profound and luminous wakefulness, the sphere from which all dharmas originate, is the all-pervasive Lord, the Dharmakaya essence of the victorious ones. May your life be as firm as the unmistaken Vajra mind. Now, please take that fee. If you can't, I don't know how you take it off the computer, but that prayer is really worth having, because when we are transforming ourselves into enlightened beings, and please do not think that any of you are far away from that, because you're not. The fact that you've managed to sit here tonight, despite all the odds going against us in South Africa, means that you really do want to attain enlightenment. And in order to attain enlightenment, you need to have Vajra, body, speech, and mind. And tonight we're looking at the speech aspect, which I've done the mind aspect millions of times. And maybe you, Marian Cassidy, can do the body part as well from your yoga, which is really important. So I'm going to tell you what Dodrupchen, who was a wonderful Dzogchen master, said about Patrul Rinpoche, talking about his Vajra speech, Patrul's Vajra speech. And this is what he said. If it's analyzed by the wise, they are found to be very meaningful. If heard by the dim-witted, in other words, people who are not able to absorb, they are easy to understand. As they condense the vital points, they are easy to remember. So remember, I don't have Vajra speech. That's why it's hard to understand me very often. But this is what Vajra speech is. Just the right length. Everything is coherent and connected from beginning to end. Vajra speech is delightful to the ear. And whatever words he uses, harsh or gentle, they become of one taste with the instructions, and so captivate the minds of all, whether wise, confused, or somewhere in between. Quite stunning. Okay, really stunning. And that's what VAJRA speech is, and I'm going to teach you a lot about it. And I want to just also start with a little story called The Sound of One Hand. I'm sure a lot of you have seen these Zen stories of the sound of one hand. The master of Kennen Temple was Mokurai, Silent Thunder. He had a little protege named Toyo, who was only 12 years old. Toyo saw the older disciples visit the master's room each morning and evening to receive instruction in Sanzen, or personal guidance, in which they were given these koans to stop mind wandering. Oh, Toyo wished to do the same as well. Wait a while, said Mokurai, you're too young, but the child insisted, and so the master finally consented. In the evening, little Toyo went at the proper time to the threshold of Mokurai's Sanzen room. He struck the gong to announce his presence, bowed respectively 3 times outside the door, and went to sit before the master in respectful silence. You can hear the sound of 2 hands when they clap together, said Mokurai. Now show me the sound of 1 hand. Toyo bowed and went to his room to consider this problem. From his window, he could hear the music of the geisha girls. Oh, I have it, he proclaimed. The next evening, when his teacher asked him to illustrate the sound of 1 hand, Toyo began to play the music of the geishas. No, no, said Mokurai. That will never do. That's not the sound of 1 hand. You haven't got it at all. Thinking that such music might interrupt, Toyo moved his abode to a quiet place, and he meditated again. What can the sound of 1 hand be? He happened to hear some water dripping. I have it, he said, imagined. When he next appeared before his teacher, Toyo imitated dripping water. What is that? Asked Mokurai. That's the sound of dripping water, but not the sound of 1 hand. Try again. In vain. Toyo meditated to hear the sound of 1 hand. He heard the sighing of the wind, but the sound was rejected. He heard the cry of an owl, and this was refused. The sound of 1 hand was not the locust. For more than 10 times, Toyo visited Mokurai with different sounds. All were wrong. And that's what they do, these Zen masters. They let you work it out for an absolute age. For almost a year, he pondered what the sound of 1 hand might be. At last, little Toyo entered true meditation and transcended all sounds. I could collect no more, he explained later, so I reached the soundless sound. Toyo had realized the sound of 1 hand. Now, it's really important, this, because you will see that when you're looking at VAJRA speech, sometimes you have to take a silent retreat to actually hear the sound of the sound of silence. That, what's his name? Paul Simon and Garfunkel, they do the sound of silence, okay? And I once asked Taisitu Rinpoche, please can you tell me what the sound of Dharmata is, the sound inside of silence? And he said, I can't explain it. I said, please, Rinpoche, it's really important to me. I'm doing the silent retreat and I really need to know. He said, all I can tell you is that when I get on an aeroplane, he said, I lie back on the aeroplane. And he said, and I hear the sound. It's inside me. He says, and I hear the sound of Dharmata. And when we die, we also hear the sound of Dharmata. So tonight, when we do our meditation, we're just going to do a totally silent meditation so you can listen to the sounds. And I've been practicing for a long time to listen to the inner sounds. But if you're in a silent retreat and inside you're talking all the time, that's as bad as being out in a lot of noise and everything. If you go into a silent retreat and you can make your mind like a mute, then you will hear that sound. It's the most amazing, amazing sound. And of course, I don't hear it properly. You probably won't either, but it's a really amazing sound. It brings everything together. So examining Vajra speech is a fascinating task. We think of speech as what comes out of your mouth, but actually, when we get enlightened, we begin to realize that speech incorporates sound, mantras, breath, and energy. Now, mantras are unbelievable. We just don't understand them. I remember once that I was doing a retreat at Kensington, and in walked the Dalai Lama's assistant. And I thought, what's he doing here? I was giving the retreat. And so I said to him, he was a lovely man. And I said to him, why are you here? So he said, because I like to listen to how the Dharma is taught in all the different centers and everything. I said, well, you're welcome, but you probably know 1,000 times more than I do. So I'm very pleased that you're here, but I hope you get what you need. And he stayed that whole afternoon. It was really lovely to have him. He made some comments and everything. And at the break, I heard a guy asking him at the break, just tell me something. What is a mantra? And he said, since I was a little boy in Tibet, I began to learn what a mantra is. He said, a mantra is a very deep, deep thing. And so I want to take, he said, it's a very deep thing. And he said, in the West, most people don't know what a mantra really is. We interpret it, we listen to it, we say it, but we haven't a clue what it's doing. And I'm going to give you tonight or next week, I'm going to do it in 2 sessions, exactly what a mantra is and how to really, really say it. And what's supposed to happen when you use a mantra in your practice. But nevertheless, okay, speech incorporates sound, mantras, breath, energy, and let's add joy to that. It's the true expression of our mind essence. Now, ordinary sentient beings like all of us have ordinary body, speech, and mind. And what exactly does that mean? Ordinary body, this body, refers to something perishable, composed of flesh and blood. It ages, it gets sick, it dies, it wrinkles, it perishes completely. That's our ordinary body. Vajra body never does. Ordinary speech, listen to what ordinary speech is, because we think we're so smart with speech. It's defined by Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche. He says, ordinary speech refers to intermittent utterances that come and go and eventually perish. Isn't that interesting? That come and go, just these utterances that come and go and eventually they perish. Very interesting. An ordinary mind refers to thought states that come and go under the power of duality, me and you. I'm telling you something, you answering me, you over there, I'm over there, this is right, this is wrong. And it's really the power of dualistic attitude. And these mental states, I think this, I want this, I have this, I'm depressed, I'm sad. These mental states are absolutely and utterly transient. So the body, speech, and mind of sentient beings are constantly changing, continually coming and going, yet, which is so interesting, yet the basis of our ordinary body, speech, and mind is the Buddha nature that actually encompasses all of samsara and nirvana. So we've got ordinary body, speech, and mind, but the base of it is our awakened nature, because from our awakened nature, our awakened mind comes ordinary body, speech, and mind, and enlightened body, speech, and mind. So, and it's very important, because if you know that it comes from the ordinary body, speech, and mind of sentient beings temporarily arose from the expression of the qualities of enlightened body, speech, and mind. So when we started making mistakes, I mean, if you went back to the Garden of Eden in the Bible, let's say, where we took ourselves away from that enlightened nature, and then we had to justify everything. So blah, 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 blah came. And the body started to get decrepit. And we didn't have enough food because the body includes the whole material environment. And we separated out. It was still from the same base. But we got ordinary body, speech, and mind that I've told you about. And now tonight, what I'm asking you for is, wouldn't you like to clear all of that so that you can have your enlightened body, speech, and mind? It's already there. You just have to find it, and you have to know that it's there, and you have to do things a little bit differently. I don't know if anybody wants to say something, but remember that within our Buddha nature, our awakened nature, are the three qualities of enlightened or Vajra body, speech, and mind, okay? And just to say one more thing about them, then I'll throw it open. The unchanging quality that is like the openness of space is called Vajra body. Now, as I'm getting older, and really, you know, I look at myself and I can look in the mirror and I can even look on the Zoom. Unfortunately, you have to see yourself on the Zoom, which is not always the easiest thing. You just realize the body is aging. Everything is aging. The energy is depleting. And yet, enlightened bodies can go on and on and on. I mean, Guru Rinpoche taught for years and years and years, hundreds of years, still on with the same body. He could just change it at random. It does not change. It's called the unchanging body. The unceasing quality is called Vajra speech. So Vajra speech, whether you're talking or whether you're in a silent state, Vajra speech is unceasing. Now, it's very, very interesting because when you watch masters, I've watched one or two masters with Vajra speech, what they do is they're teaching, and they're not looking at any notes like I do. They're teaching from the enlightened mind, and they're doing the teaching going on, and then in the middle of that teaching, they go, I've watched them, and then they go out with the next teaching. So it's unceasing. And I've often wondered, what are they doing when they take that deep breath? They're obviously taking the energy and putting it into the central channel, the non-dualistic channel, so that their speech is total truth as it's coming out, and it's called unceasing speech, unceasing quality of Vajra speech. And then, of course, the mind, the Vajra mind, the enlightened mind, is called the unmistaken quality. The capacity to perceive even without thought is called Vajra mind. Very So the body is the unchanging quality. The speech is the unceasing quality, and the mind is the unmistaken quality. Those are very important points for you to have, really important. So does anyone want to say or ask at this stage? Because it's really a very, very deep and interesting subject. The more I research it, the more there is. The more I was doing the talk, the more things were landing in my hands of what to teach you about. So it's such a fascinating subject. It's really, really fascinating. And I want to develop Vajra speech. It is Amitabha and the Lotus family. Their quality is enlightened speech and enlightened communication and joy and magnetizing beings into them. It's really a beautiful subject and makes me very excited. Anyone want to ask or say? Or you just want to listen? Henry, you want to say something?
Not really, but I'm remembering something you said about how the Buddha, when he started, to travel and talk, how he did it in all the languages, and that was, or just one language, and everyone could understand, which was also the Vajra, right? That was a nice story. Am I remembering this correct?
Correct. And not only that, in those times they didn't have what's it? I can't think of it.
Microphones.
Microphones. I couldn't think of the word. Sorry, they didn't have microphones, but there were thousands and thousands of people, and I mean, everybody could hear perfectly in their own language at their own level, all at the same time. Where have we dropped off in the planet? So let's look at what covers over. All we need to do is to recognize, she's having a hard time with her load shedding. All we need to do is recognize the three Vajras, but ordinary confusion covers them up. Our physical body of flesh and blood covers the Vajra body. So you have to dig deep to get it, because our physical body of flesh and blood covers the Vajra body. Now, it's so interesting that, because this body is probably not one bit really bound to this dimension. We can probably do 1,000 things. Look at us in the dream state, where we go, what we do, what we receive. So the physical body of flesh and blood covers the Vajra body. The words and sounds we utter, which are interrupted and intermittently created, obscure the unceasing quality of Vajra speech. And our train of thoughts that come and go and endlessly arise and cease from moment to moment, day after day, life after life, is exactly what obscures the unmistaken quality of Vajra mind. Sorry, I never think of an actual Vajra body. Of course, there is a Vajra body. The Vajra body is the pure body that doesn't ever age. I mean, how did these masters stay? How did the Buddha stay? How did Guru Rinpoche stay for eons and eons of time? He was in a Nirmanakaya body, but a Nirmanakaya body doesn't die. It doesn't, it just goes back to the essence all the time and goes and manifests wherever it needs to. And you've got that in you. And a small example of it is when you're traveling, in your sleep state, when you're going to other dimensions and all of that. And we're watching a movie at the moment where there are all these different dimensions. So this girl comes back in another dimension and everything. So my husband says, that's such rubbish. But I said, it's so fascinating. Okay. It's called The Gift. And I found it so fascinating. It's a series. While I'm cleaning out all my things, I watch it. And I found it so fascinating because, it exists now on a completely different level. She's got a gift and she sees the whole of the world in a different way. And that is really, really feasible and possible for us. Because enlightened body, speech, and mind, or Vajra body, speech, and mind, is definitely not limited to our little physical lives that we're having over here. And our speech is not limited. Have none of you ever had the experience where someone asks you something and you don't know the answer, but the answer comes out? And I've had that a lot in my life, that I don't know where, I know that I haven't thought that out, but things come out. And it happens a lot in teaching, that I didn't know that I knew this or I knew that, and out it comes. So it's really very, very, very important to stop pondering ourselves as limited people, so limited, when we've got Vajra body, speech, and mind right within us, and we can start using it, expanding our horizons. And to understand Vajra speech, we must have Vajra body to enable the speech, and of course Vajra mind, the essence from whence the Vajra speech arises. It's important to understand all three. So when we go back to examining our true nature, and stop me if you're not understanding this, we look at the essence nature, and its unlimited capacity of energy. Essence, nature, unlimited capacity, from where your Vajra speech comes, obviously. Now, if you look at that in different ways, it's called emptiness, full of possibility, awareness, and cognizance, brightness, and its capacity is unlimited compassion. And if you look at it again, you can say Vajra mind, Vajra speech, Vajra body. Or you can say Dharmakaya, Sambhokakaya, Niyamanakaya. Now, it's really important that you explore these three kayas, that you don't just think of them limited way and read about them, but that you explore them. What is the meaning of a Sambhokakaya that we can get to when we die? What is the meaning of it? The speech is involved in the Sambhokakaya, okay? And then another way of looking at those three is to look at the pujas that we do, the sadhanas that we do. We do it's empty, and we do the creation of the deity. Then we do the mantra recitation, Vajra mind, Vajra speech, creating the body, and then we do dissolving it into emptiness again, back into the mind. Now, when we look at those three, that's what Vajrayana practice is about. Everything in life is about that. Your essence, which is emptiness, your nature, which is knowing and absolutely vibrant, and that's where the speech is. And you're going back into the emptiness afterwards, or the unlimited capacity afterwards. We've got this. It's time to wake up. It's time to see this. The more I deal with this, the more excited I become. Because Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche says, every deity that we're dealing with, which is your own qualities, every Buddha is identical in their expanse of Vajra body, speech, and mind. So he says, you can keep a bond to all of them. And you go, how can you keep a bond to all of them? He says, in a very simple way, just chant 3 syllables for the body, speech, and mind of all the Buddhas. So you go, what are the 3 syllables? He goes, Ah, Hum. Finito. Ah, Hum. What does that mean? What's the meaning of Ah, Hum? Is the essence of Vairashana, the manifester of all the forms, the enlightened body of all the Buddhas. Ah is the beginning of your speech. It's the syllable for the essence of Amitabha, the lotus family. The lotus family, if you belong there like I do, their essence is communication, really going out to people, giving their Vajra speech. The speech is the essence of Amitabha, who's called boundless light. It's the speech of all the Buddhas. And Hum is the syllable for the essence of Akshobhya or Vajra Sattva, the unshakable, which is the nature of mind free of conceptual thinking, the essence of the mind of all Buddhas. He says, actually, it's perfectly fine when you go and do your morning practice to just chant. Om, ah, hum, om, ah, hum, om, ah, hum. Chant it with me. Om, ah, hum, om, ah, hum, om, ah, hum. Vajra body, Vajra speech, Vajra mind. You can use Om, ah, hum for anything. So if you're eating and you want to offer your food, you just go Om, ah, hum, and you've got incorporated everything. And Tulku Urgent Rinpoche says, the more you can sing Om, ah, hum, the better it is. The more you will develop your body, speech, and mind. Why don't you make a song of it, Viam? I'm always telling you to make a song. But do you understand that the songs of all these famous masters, these dohas that they wrote and that they sang, were all the Vajra speech. They came spontaneously from the mind, and they never stopped. They never sat like me when I'm writing a song and found the rhyme and wrote it all out. They just said it, and their disciples recorded it. A beautiful way of communicating, knowing what your audience is, knowing who everybody is, and just having this absolute dimension of voice of Amitabha, of the Lotus family, and being able to give it the enlightened activity of the Lotus family is magnetizing. Now think about it. I mean, I watch the Songsar Khyentse Rinpoche, okay? He magnetizes people. When he's on the Zoom, they stop it at 1,000 people, because his Vajra speech brings all the people, thousands of people together from all the countries of the world, because it's a magnetic voice. It magnetizes people into the teaching. It's absolutely amazing. And so the essence of the body, speech, and mind of all the Buddhas, which is Om, Ah, Hum, can also be called deity, mantra, samadhi, body, speech, mind. Deity, where you make the perfect body, mantra, which is the electricity which gets the whole practice into being, and samadhi, which is just sitting quietly in your Vajra mind. Now, surely you've got something to say. This is the background of the Vajra speech, and then I want to really get into the real essence of it. When I read you the 60 qualities of Vajra speech, your tongue will be hanging out, because you'd really wish that you could meet somebody that had Vajra speech, that you could really, really listen. And people are magnetizing, but remember, the body includes the whole material dimension. The speech includes the vital energy of the body, the prana, the lung, and it's the circulation of that vital energy that is linked to the breath. Okay, and the mind includes the intellectual mind that reasons, and the nature of mind that's not subject to the intellect. And so the body, speech, and mind of ordinary sentient beings is conditioned and caught up in the dualistic world, and it's all to do with karma. Now, Mariam Cassidy, I just want your comment when I say speech or voice includes the vital energy of the body, the prana or the lung, the circulation of which is linked to the breathing. Now, I want to know what your yogi opinion is on that, your yoga opinion on that, if you can. Would be lovely if you switched on your camera, but I really think you've got a lot to offer here. She's laughing. Okay, you can laugh. You can stay without your camera, but tell me what you think. What do you teach your yoga classes about the prana linked to the breath? You don't want to. Can you hear me? Okay, doesn't matter. When you're ready, and if you can hear me, it'll be lovely to have your input on it, because I think that that's very much what the yoga, the yoga links with the breath and the prana and everything else. And I think that the speech is exactly like that. Are you having trouble with your internet, Marian?
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you perfectly.
Oh, okay. I was talking away.
God,
Sorry, I'm in the dark, Mel. So the breath in yoga, they say, is connected to the entire nervous system, and which contains 72,000 nadis or channels.
Yeah.
And like the breath is that's the most, like in Buddhism, that is the most subtle aspect of mind. So that's why the breathing is so important in yoga practice, to generate from the physical body going really internally and tuning into that breath when you're practicing. So you become in that space where there is no thought, and you actually are like, almost, if you understand a little bit of emptiness or whatever, like who is the I while you're practicing. So you're not thinking or conceptualizing or creating a video of external, you're really going within. Yeah,
Beautiful.
that makes sense.
Does make sense. To me, it does. Yeah. And so how do you see this, that the Vajra speech is linked completely to the prana, which is then linked to the breath? Isn't that the same thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's the speech is the prana.
So
Absolutely.
Okay, so when we are talking our intermittent garbage, which is most of the time, okay, what's happening to that energy? What's happening to that? We're not breathing correctly. We're not, the things can't be correct. I mean, it's so clear to me that when you put them
all people have to do is just start taking really deep breaths. They can even hold the breath or not, but just to breathe really deeply will start calming the mind down. So the minute you're not thinking correctly or breathing correctly, it kind of helps. When you do breathe correctly, the mind really starts to calm down. And these days, there's a lot of stuff on breath work. Okay. There's a lot of breath workshops going on. So people start to do deep breathing, and they access all that internal trauma that is sitting there. They actually people struggle to breathe deep. And I was at a workshop where people started crying because the minute they started breathing deep, and the exhale, they started releasing, or stuff started coming to the surface. Yeah.
No, and you know why? Because all the negative emotions, the clashes, are all contained in the speech. So as soon as you're speaking and the energy is going, all the negative emotions are there. So people can't actually, that comes out immediately. So the minute you start breathing properly, getting all the energy, you are going to, all the rubbish is going to start, getting extracted from the body, which is so interesting,
Yeah, because initially people are like just doing their practice and looking externally outwards, and then thinking, oh, how do I look in my posture, or there's all that stuff going on. So then when you start to access the physical and you start to find the breath with the physical posture, then you go deeper and you start to focus more on just the breathing, which calms the mind down, and then it becomes like a meditation.
So are you getting Vajra body yet?
Maybe sometimes when I practice, it's quite nice. Sometimes, yeah, there is no, I'm not thinking of the physical. It's totally subtle and within. I don't always get it, but there are moments, maybe.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's fantastic, really. And interrupt.
Like a selfless thing.
Yeah, because it's really important what you're saying. Now I'm going to read you just quickly and then we'll meditate. What Francesca Fremantle actually says. Now, she was a disciple of Chogyam Trungpa, and she wrote such beautiful things. And I came across this as I was cleaning out my cupboards, and I thought it really, really gives you a full description of Vajra speech, and then we can meditate, because there's so much teaching on the mantra, which I want to give you, but I want to read you what she says. She says, like the Sambhogakaya, speech is the dimension of energy, communication, and emotion. Energy, communication, and emotion. It unites the body and mind. She says, we are used to thinking of ourselves as body and mind, but we generally ignore or do not bother to identify this third aspect of our nature. Speech does not mean only words or sounds produced by the voice. It's not only that, okay? These are only the outermost manifestation of speech. It also refers to emotional energy. Now think about this. Emotional energy which fuels all forms of expression, and to the breath, which is another aspect of vital energy. Now that's so important, because, you know, people say to me, you're very enthusiastic about the Dharma. Well, I am. And that my emotion of enthusiasm must come out in the speech. Now, when you're angry, it comes out in your speech. When you're depressed, it comes out in your speech. However you feel, when you feel rejected, when you feel humiliated, then you can't get your voice. I want you to make this connection to fear. When your voice is afraid, it comes through the energy of whatever you're speaking. So she says it refers to the emotional energy which fuels all forms of expression, okay, and to the breath. The voice depends entirely on the breath in its usual sense, but any form of creative expression, whatever medium it uses, depends on the flow of our inner breath or our energy. We say, I found my voice. We say, I found my voice when we discover how to express what we really want to communicate through words, music, art, dance, or any other means. Now, this is so interesting, because we've got some very intellectual friends, and you never see them express themselves. They express themselves purely intellectually. There are lots of people like that. They don't put the emotions into whatever they're expressing. I mean, it's such a fascinating thing when you really look at it, because dance and art and any music and all of that are all the part of Vajra speech. Communication is the essence of speech, both between mind and body and between each individual and the world outside. Just as the sense of body includes the environment, so speech includes all the sounds of the world. Now just think about that. When we hear a loud sound, for example, I'll give you an example. Like when I was on retreat in India, that was the year they were going to repaint the monastery. Okay, so outside my silent retreat, there were ladders and there were men climbing up the ladders, and they were talking, and they were, you know, and there was clanging and banging and all kinds of things happening. And I'm going like, how am I meant to do a retreat with all this noise? So I opened the window, and it was an Indian man, and I said to him, I'm trying to meditate. So he sat down on the piece of wood and he started to sing a mantra. And I looked at this and I thought, it's all included in the noise. You are meant to hear the noise as mantras. And here is this man who's obviously a yogi or something of some sort, who's painting the building, and he's sitting there going, Om, 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 and I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, I'm complaining because I'm not hearing it as the sound, and he's giving it to me on a platter. All sounds are included in Vajra speech. And that's why at the end of your puja, it says, all sounds become the sound of the mantra. So if there's banging, clapping, noises, whatever there is, it's all the sound of mantra. And you know that story of that Surya Das wrote the story of his friend who was in Hong Kong, and the friend had been in a monastery for years, and now he came and lived in Hong Kong on a busy street. And in the morning, he just couldn't do his practice. He couldn't do it because there was such a noise and all the hooting in the street and the shouting and everything. He said, how can I do my practice after a beautiful monastery? And one day, he suddenly remembered that when he went into the shrine room, when he was in his monastery, and you know, the Tibetan prayers, you've got the clangs and the clongs and the drums and the bells and all that. He said, what was the difference? Why don't I hear the traffic sound as the sound? I loved it when they went clang, clang, clang in the monastery, but when they go, I associate it with a terrible noise. And so he never had a problem with his practice again after that. So she says, just as the sense of body includes the environment, so speech includes all the sounds of the world. Communication is a two-way process. We continually receiving messages from everything around us and responding to them by sending out our messages in all kinds of ways. I mean, parents, what messages do they send? If the child's making a noise, they go, they may not even say anything, but they give a dirty look, or you give a dirty look to someone. Those are your communications. Although speech is a more abstract concept than body, we're just as attached to its apparent reality, and we believe in it just too much. In spite of evidence of the unreliability of speech, we rely on words to convey our thoughts and trust them to express what we really mean. Now, the Dalai Lama once said that he was talking to this young man who was in a terrible state. And I read the story about him. He said he was talking to this young man who was in a terrible state, and he was explaining to him that depression is transient, it hasn't got any substance, blah, 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 blah. And this man was looking at him, not a thing was penetrating. And he said, suddenly, he just put his hand on the guy. And the guy was almost cured from that. Just having that communication of, I know what you feel without any words, was much more than all the intellectual things about the words that he was saying. So she says, we feel that what we say wells up from our true nature and confirms our existence. The sense of Vajra speech develops from becoming aware of the inherent emptiness of speech, the space around words, the silence that envelops sound, the openness from which communication arises, the absence of ego at its very root. Speech is creative power, she writes, the power of mantra. All languages are sacred, not just Sanskrit, and any word or sound can be perceived as mantra. If we simply listen without expectations, hearing the emptiness behind the sound, we can become sensitive to its inner quality and the message it carries. It's the music of non-self and wakefulness. The poet Milarepa is often portrayed with one hand cupped to his ear, listening intently to his own songs as they arise out of his emptiness and silence. All speech, she says, can become the poetry of the Dharma when it flows from that sense of spaciousness. The transformation of ordinary speech into Vajra speech is brought about by reciting mantras. Mantra is not just a prayer or an invocation, she says, it's the deity itself. It's the living presence of the deity in sound, just as the visual image is its living present in form. Mantra is also the deity's own speech, the word of power that accomplishes the deity's enlightened actions. Like the visualized form, the sound of mantra dissolves back into emptiness at the end of meditation. And through this practice, we learn to experience everything we say and everything we hear as mantra, resounding yet empty like an echo. It's a beautiful, beautiful teaching that I feel. Anyone want to ask or say, Shane Kati, you've got to really listen hard while you're walking and clapping and trains. You're having to do that today. It should be a quiet concentration today. Anyone want to say anything? Ask anything? Yes, Mimi, please.
Am I unmuted? You know, there used to be someone in my life who used to scream at me, and the Akon Rinpoche always used to say, you must hear the words while he's screaming, Om Mani Pemi Hung. And it did work. It actually did help me. But what I really wanted to talk about was what Henry said, you know, about people understanding things. I think I've said to you once before, Suleiman, who established the gift of the givers, he got his instructions from a spiritual teacher who spoke Turkish. And Suleiman does not understand Turkish at all. And he got all the instructions of how to establish it, what to do, and exactly how this gift of the givers would work. And he didn't understand a word of Turkish, but he got the whole message.
Imaho. You see, and that's what I'm talking about. You get it. It's not about the words. The words can be, remember, the Vajra words are truthful. Okay. But, you know, there's one thing being truthful. What I've learned, and we've had a lot of discussions on this, Mimi, is that sometimes, I mean, I used to always, as a little girl, I always used to say the truth, whatever I saw in people. And I still remember my mother saying to me, you are so tactless. Okay, you're so tactless. You just come out with it as it is. Now, what you learn as you learn the Vajra speech is not just to come out with things that are truth, but to discern the whole environment. How do you tell somebody the truth when they don't want to hear it? You don't say it directly like that at that particular time, unless you're a master and they've come to you for some consult or something like that. But people won't hear it. So part of the whole point of the mantra and hearing it in the Vajra speech is to be able to be in touch with people where they are, how they are, what they need. And yes, it can be truthful, but when you have Vajra speech, the truth is kind of, what can I say, not diluted, but the truth is softened for the benefit of that particular being. Do you know what I'm saying, Mim? It's like really important, because sometimes if you just tell the truth to people, you lose them completely and totally. And that's not the idea. The idea is to help people. I think what you're saying is absolutely wonderful about him getting the instructions in another language. And I want to tell you about the Sambokakai and about the mantra. But please ask or say whatever you want to. Anyone. Okay, I'm happy if you think about it, but you are very welcome to butt in, because these things are very important that you understand them. Tonight, I'm not talking about an intellectual lecture on Vajra speech. I'm talking about ourselves. How do we get that middle part, which is essence, nature, and compassion. How do we get it? How do we start evolving into Vajra speech? How do I start making myself an instrument of Vajra speech? I know that when I'm studying a thing like this and preparing it, it gives me the greatest joy, the greatest joy. And for me, Lama Yeshe always says to me, there's got to be joy in your teaching. Of course, you can't have joy for absolutely everything. But how much joy do you hear when you switch on the news? How many beautiful things do you watch? How much joy do you hear in what people are saying on the news? I just hear all this blah, 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 earthquakes, this, that, the other, anything that's sensational. Vajra speech doesn't have to be sensational, but it's from the heart, deep, deep, deep. So let's do a silent meditation, completely silent. Now, what I want you to do when you do this meditation is start off and take some breath, but I want you to listen to the inner sound tonight. You'll find that it's almost like a noise when you hear those cicadas, you know, when you're walking in the forest or whatever, and those cicadas, they've got a distinct sound. When you listen inside you, you will find that sound, and it gets louder and louder and louder, so that when you die, when you hear the sound of Dhammata, it is written that it is the sound of 1,000 thunderclaps. And you hear it absolutely exquisitely inside you. So let's just do a 5-minute meditation, absolutely silently. Jack, silently, not with your barking, please. Okay, so let's do it. But whatever sound there is in your house, doesn't matter. Listen inside and see if you can hear that inner sound. Did you hear it? I can hear it so loudly while we're sitting. Did you hear that inner sound? That's called the sound of Dharmata. Could you hear it? Cicadas. You could hear the cicadas. Okay. I don't know, but it sounds exactly like the cicadas. It is a most amazing thing. And when you're very quiet inside you, it becomes even much stronger. It's such an amazing sound. And if you just allow your mind to resonate with it, it has a most unbelievable effect on us. It really, really does, Any questions, anything anyone wants to say? Because I want to go on otherwise a little bit more tonight. Not too much, but ask me, talk, say what you feel. Fiona, what do you think?
Yeah, it's what you've been saying makes a lot of sense to me. I am quite passionate about that that idea of everything being sound, a lot of things being. I don't mean that everything almost. I don't want. I hesitate to use the word resonates. To certain frequencies and all that sort of thing. I don't want to go into too much depth about it, but I mean, it puts me in mind whenever I hear, this is not going into more the Christian side, but in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was, I think, with God, and the Word was God, or something along those lines. I can never remember the exact word. And that always that idea of the divine logos, that primordial sound, that always is what this puts me in mind of.
But that's so important because I've got this lovely little thing on the mantras, and it's fascinating because he actually talks a lot about the word, the logos, and how important it is that all creation starts with a word. And if you see the speech, the Vajra speech, the word A-H, do you have that Do you have that one?
I can bring.
See if you can bring it, because then you'll all see what that creative word is. Now, when you go to sleep at night, tonight, you should take the R. And in fact, if you can, in your bed, if it's not there, Mimi's got it there. Okay, you take that R and you see it in your heart, and that R goes out. It's R, R. That's the creative sound. And that R goes absolutely out, and it transforms everything in your whole environment into rainbow light. And then you bring it back into the R, and that's how you fall asleep. And you'll see it'll change your entire sleep state, because you want to use this creative speech in your whole life. Like tomorrow, when you've got to talk to people. And I know, Henry, you do a lot of talking, to people, and you have to communicate, and you're always writing about your communication, which is the same thing. There you go. And that's what you look at. That R is the complete and total creative word of Vajra speech. And if you download that on your phone, you'll get it easily on your phone. If you download that on your phone, you'll find it absolutely amazing to go to sleep with. It's really, really an amazing thing, because that is the essence of the Sambhogakaya. And the Sambhogakaya, we have to reach a certain level to be able to relate to the Sambhogakaya level, but it's the pure, luminous, clarity expression of the Dharmakaya, the clarity expression. And the way it's written about in all books, and you'll read this a lot of times, is that Samantabhadra, or the Sambhogakaya Buddha, with his own mind, creates the Sangha. And then the Sangha are around him, but the Sangha are all the same level as he is. And then as they ask the questions and he gives the Vajra speech teaching, and even though they already know the answers, the answers get recorded, and we get that in all the beautiful teachings. We get that, you know, that whole staged performance of the Sambhogakaya, so that we can actually learn these beautiful teachings. So also with the Guru Yoga, when you do the Guru Yoga, each of the Guru Yoga, that's why I keep telling you how important the Guru Yoga is with the 4 empowerments. So the first empowerment is for Vajra body. And the second empowerment into the throat, which we can look at, is for the Vajra speech. So when you do that Guru Yoga, it's for the Vajra speech. And when it goes into the heart, the third empowerment is for the Vajra mind. And all 3 together in the 4th empowerment are for body, speech, and mind. Enlightened body, speech, and mind. So that Guru Yoga is absolutely essential to anything. Now let's do the speech part of the Guru Yoga. So sit and imagine that you have already had the first empowerment, which is called the vase empowerment, white into your head. We won't go into it for tonight. We can do it another time. But it transforms your body into Vajra body. Now let's look at what happens after that. The second empowerment is called the secret empowerment. And it comes from the Guru's throat. So imagine it from Guru Rinpoche's throat into your throat, cleansing your speech, cleansing your prana, and defeating Klesha Mara. What does that mean? Defeating Klesha Mara means Klesha Mara is all your negative emotions. So the minute this red comes into your throat from the Guru, it defeats all those negative emotions, Klesha Mara, and it prepares the way for the recitation of the mantra syllables. It gives you the Vajra speech from the master's speech into your speech. It gives you the Vajra speech, and it gives you the ability, and we're going to study the mantras, to do the mantra recitation with great passion, okay? And it plants the seed of the Vidyadhara, that's the knowledge holder, who's got power over life. Now I want you to just consider this. The Vidyadhara, or the knowledge holder, who's got power over life, means that you can do anything. You can overcome all the negativity. You can overcome everything because you have that Vidyadhara with the power over life. And it gives you the potential of the Sambhogakaya, which is called the body of enjoyment. And you hear the sound, the empty sound of the mantra. Now that's the second empowerment in the Guru Yoga. And really, 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 those of you that want to get enlightened, you need to do the Guru Yoga every day. I've done it more complex just so that you can get to it, but you need to do it. So I'm just going to give you one more thing tonight, and then we'll carry on with it next time, and when I'll give you all the qualities, the 60 qualities. But if you look at a mantra, it's a very interesting thing, because James Lowe talks about the mantra, and he says like this. He says, a mantra is not a magical function. It's not creating its result because it has some special power. It's a cog in the wheel. It drives your activity. So when you're in trouble and you are really needing to, like I know that we don't have the belief that it drives the cog of activity. But when I watched Lama Yeshe Rinpoche tame a dog with Om Mani Padme Hum, it was not because the Om Mani Padme Hum tamed the dog. It was because his absolute conviction in what the Om Mani Padme Hum could do tamed the dog. And I saw it with my own eyes. A growling dog that we were told not to pass just sat like a little lamb when he said the mantra. Now, James Lowe says, when you put on an electric kettle, you press the button which joins the current, then the energy flows and the water heats up. Similarly, he says, the mantra is a means of establishing an energetic connection which continues as long as one recites the mantra. He said that's why Tibetans do lots of mantra, because mantras perform the essential activity. He says otherwise, you go to town, you dial in for a cup of tea. You go to town, he says, he always gives these practical examples. He says, you buy tea, milk, sugar, all the things you need because you didn't have them. You come home and you're tired and you put the water in the kettle and you're waiting to have your lovely cup of tea. But the kettle never boils because you didn't press the button. Now the button is the mantra. It's the living form of the deity. But you can't go, Om Mani Padme, Om Mani Padme, and then you're thinking of this and you're thinking of that and you're thinking of this and you're thinking of that. When Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche recites the money, it takes him right to his mind essence. So James Lowe says, some practices are very long and you spend a lot of time on everything leading up to it, but a very little time on the mantras. He says when these Tibetan masters tell you about their practice, they tell you how many manis they did, how many mantras they did. They don't tell you how many pujas they did or sadhana. They tell you how many mantras they did. I've done 10 million mantras, because the mantra is the electricity. And if you do it with distraction, it's hopeless. It's like not turning on the kettle. So when you do, the main thing, I remember Lama Sondru saying, the main thing is the reciting of the mantra. But you've got to recite the mantra without thinking about this, thinking about that. You've got to recite the mantra with a pure mind, and then it is the electricity. And that's how he brings you to things. Listen, everybody, this is a very exciting subject. I'm really sorry. I mean, what I should do with this is I should keep collecting stuff and then do a day's retreat on Vajra speech, because it's so special and it will so change your lives that it's really wonderful. And when you look at the communication and you look at the things as they are and how we are in the world and how much we need this Vajra speech, the sound, how we need to incorporate sound and breath and energy into ourselves. It's a very exciting subject, don't you think? I think it is. I really, really do. And I think, Henry, for you who does a lot of public speaking and things like that, it's so important. I just remember I was telling someone yesterday, I said it's such an interesting thing, because when I used to teach at Compassionate Friends, you know, the parents who'd lost children, I used to teach on various subjects. So the one night I put a subject, they asked me to teach, and I put a subject there, where have our children gone? Okay, so it caused absolute chaos. The whole place was packed. They couldn't even fit the people in the house because they want to know where have their children gone. And that was the topic of my lecture and everything. So I was about to give the lecture, and the woman who was there, who invited me, came up to me and said, I hope you won't give anything spiritual. She said, because you know, at Compassionate Friends, you know, we don't give any particular opinions. And I turned around to her and I said to her, you know what? Look at the amount of people that are here. Does it not tell you something? Can you not read what the environment is about? Why are you already censoring me before I've even started? Anyway, the long and the short of it is I didn't let her censor me, but I never got another invitation to Compassionate Friends. I gave it to parents who were there, which was my main thing. I always used to get invited, but after that I didn't get invited. I didn't tell too many deep things, but I said the truth of what I knew. And these parents really wanted to hear it. And many of them phoned me after that to want to see me and things like that. So, but she took what would have been a natural thing and what would have been, I would have been able that night to dilute what I knew as the truth, to make it fit for all those people. A lot of them are Christians and a lot of them are, have different religions. But she didn't trust that. She needed to order it. Now, you can't take VAJRA speech and censor it. It's got to be spontaneous. It's got to be beautiful. It's got to be communicative. It's got to be everything that comes from your essence. So let's dedicate, and if anybody wants to ask me next week, we'll go on to the mantra recitation and what it really, really, really means, some very beautiful teaching on it. And then let's take it from there. Okay. So let's dedicate for all the people who are lost in the world, especially in the earthquakes and especially in those terrible floods. And even in South Africa, there are all the floods. So we pray for all the victims of these terrible natural disasters and the people who are really struggling. And may VAJRA speech come to them so they can understand everything in the environment. And through this merit, may we achieve all-seeing Buddhahood. And thereafter, once all harmful enemies have been defeated, may all beings be liberated from the ocean of existence, stirred by the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Sonam die tamche zipane, topne nepe tranam pamshene, jegana chi palak topaye, sipe sole doa do warsho.